You're sitting in the sun. Pay attention. All right, we're going to get started. For those of you I have not met, my name is Lackey. I have a lot of content that I'm going to get through today, so I'm just going to kind of jump right in and rip through this, and then hopefully we'll have a lot of time at the end for questions. So as I'm going through, anything that hits your mind, questions, something that I've said, a business I've talked about, anything, please feel free to ask me questions about it. Happy to go deep into any of this stuff. So I like to really think about this entrepreneur's journey. All of us, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what stage you are, no matter where you live in the world, we're basically all on the same 5-step journey. And I love this sort of visualization of this beautiful path up the mountain, up to the peak, because at the peak, that's where we have our aspirations, our goals and dreams, the things that we're trying to do, whether it's net worth or wealth or impact that we want to have in the world or freedom that we have. These are the reasons that we start companies and that we become entrepreneurs. But the reality of entrepreneurship, and a lot of you can relate to this, doesn't often look quite that pretty. And Baby Bathwater does a really good job of sending the little memes about what day-to-day life for an entrepreneur really is. And I can almost assure you that if your journey thus far has been beautiful and smooth, the future might hold a few bumps. That's just kind of the reality of the choices that we've made. So I want to start out by kind of punching you in the nose with a few stats and a few things that are some of the challenges that you're either maybe feeling or have gone through or you might feel, and then hopefully that sets up for what you can do about it, some of the changes that I would recommend that you might consider. So here are a couple things that you're probably aware of, but kind of facts and data points. Number one, dependency on founders is often way, way too high. Because you're really good at what you do, because you're committed, that's awesome, but then it also becomes a criteria for the business. You make the key decisions, you're in the critical path, you're closing the deals, you're writing the code, all the things, and that means the business is too dependent on you. That's not good for the business, and it's definitely not good for you. The other one that I think is really tragic, and a lot of people don't understand this or don't know this, is that scale doesn't equal personal wealth. And so a lot of people have been told as entrepreneurs, once I get into the 7 figures and once I get to 5 million and maybe I get to 10 million, then I'll start making really good money and I'll put some money in my pocket and my net worth will start to feel really good. And the reality is your business might become very valuable. The enterprise value, the net worth of the business could be 20, 30, 40, 50 million, 100 million, whatever it is. It is rare that that actually translates directly to your net worth until you monetize the business. I'm working with someone right now that has a business that did 30 plus million last year in revenue, probably worth 70, 80 million. And the two co-founders are paying themselves kind of market salaries. And we talked about net worth and their optionality, and it really dawned on them is, you know what? We have a lot of net worth on paper, but anything can change that, and it's just not the reality they're living. Their net worth personally is very low relative to the business they've created. So that is something that, unfortunately, people need to understand. The other one, which I talk a lot about, and I know some of you have heard my talks before, but statistically speaking, you are not likely to exit. So the reality is 90% of entrepreneurs in this room and around the world will need or want to exit one day, but only 20% of entrepreneurs that are trying to exit close a deal. So 1 out of 5 people that hire bankers and go into a process and want to close a deal, only about 20% of them actually get a deal done. So the odds are pretty negative. They're stacked against us. And even more tragically, those that close deals, which is small, 20%, a very small subset of them, I'd say less than 5%, truly optimize value. If you interview an entrepreneur after they've sold their company, almost all of them will tell you, I screwed it up. I should have done something differently. I wish I would have known this. I should have structured that differently. And they leave life-changing money on the table. I can tell you, and I'm happy to go into detail, I left millions and millions of dollars on the table in both of my first 2 exits simply because I didn't know what I was doing. And thankfully for me, I had a few more at-bats, and so I got to figure it out over time. But the reality is most entrepreneurs have one shot. It's a life-changing opportunity. Maybe you have a business that you can sell. You want to make sure you maximize value. The odds are stacked against us. So that means that most of you have great businesses, but the value is kind of trapped inside. It's really difficult to monetize it and sort of extract it. And to me, I've been thinking about this a lot in the past year. That basically means that we're asset rich and option poor. Your business might be worth a lot. You might see a lot out there. It might be growing. but you just don't have a lot of optionality. And in the world that we're living in today, that optionality, which I'll talk more about, I think is more important than ever. So 90% of entrepreneurs get stuck in what I call the grind. And there, it doesn't mean you're unhappy, especially in a group like this. It's a bunch of outliers doing great things. You're in a relatively pretty place here in the world, spending time with cool people. But it's still a grind. You're still kind of on the treadmill with few options. And so I want to talk a little bit about how that changes. We'll take 1 second here, and I won't go into this. This is a really busy slide. Let me get out of your way. But what I'd like you to do is just look at this slide, and this is basically the signals that you have in a business to tell you kind of how option rich and what kind of options you have. And so we'll pick just a few of them. So let's look at cash. If you have a business where you have very predictable cash, so you have recurring revenue, great cash flow, you know what next quarter is going to look like, you have a lot of cash on the balance sheet, you have a lot of cash optionality. Cash can be your friend, you can be very strategic, you can make investments, you can buy things, hire people. If, in fact, you have predictable revenue, but your balance sheet isn't very strong, and sometimes cash really doesn't allow you to make the hire that you'd like to make, or you can't invest in the campaign you'd like to make, maybe you're kind of in the yellow zone. And then for a lot of entrepreneurs, cash is a driving factor. You cannot make decisions because you don't have the cash. It's magic. I could easily be hitting buttons and not realize it, so let me know if I'm off screen. So be thinking about that. Where would you sort of rank yourself? Same thing with concentration. You got customer concentration and channel concentration. If you have a business that has a product and you sell on Amazon, you sell direct, you sell retail, you wholesale, you got a TikTok store, that's a very diversified business. And you're doing well in all those channels. Or you have a business that's a service and you have all these customers, none of which represent more than 10% of your revenue. That's great diversification. That's green. But if you have maybe you're really big on Amazon and direct, but you don't do much else, then you have a couple good channels, you're not highly diversified. Or you have a customer that represents 20, 30% of your business. You're kind of in the yellow. If in fact you are a business that is dominated by a single channel, you are direct only, D2C, or you have a customer that represents 40, 50% of your revenue, you have a very fragile business as it relates to customer concentration. And then the last one that I'll mention here is key person. This is true of a founder, so this is true of many of you, or your leadership team, CTO, VP of sales, whatever it is. If you stepped away, not for a couple days in Cabo, but for 2 or 3 weeks, does the business run exactly the same in your absence? Then it has low dependency on key people. If you can disappear, but maybe if your CTO disappeared, then in fact it would be...
Every time you look back, it goes back on.
It's, you're just trying to mess me up, aren't you? But the extreme is you are the business. And this is still sadly true for a lot of entrepreneurs. If you disappear, a lot of things change. The business looks very different. They can't make decisions. They can't move forward. And so you don't have to necessarily raise your hands, but is anybody red in any of these categories? Do you feel like you have any of these risks? And it would be shocking if you didn't have at least one red. That's very normal. It's not a bad thing, but it just basically means one shock to the business can create fragility. It means you don't have full optionality because one market thing can happen, one macroeconomic, one COVID, global pandemic, and you can feel this stuff very viscerally, and it changes your option set. So I wanted you to kind of think about where you are in this, and then we'll talk about some of these things. So for me, optionality is basically the ability to choose your next move from strength. And one of the ones, and not pressure, right? Not being sort of forced into something. One of the best ways for me to gauge a business's optionality is when something happens in the world, a black swan event, a global pandemic, a recession, we bomb another country, all these things that truly happen all the time. I used to think black swan events were truly black swan. I think there's one every year in my life. It just seems to happen all the time. But in those situations, you need to have multiple paths. You need to be able to say, I don't have to do anything. My business is strong. I can stay the course. I can do exactly what I'm doing. I've got lots of options. Or, you know what? I need to raise money. I need to go get a loan or a line of credit. You know what the worst time to go to a bank for a line of credit is? When you need it. And guess what? When you need it, so does everyone else. And so when you have these options, when you're like, you know what, I don't have to do anything. I've got a line of credit. I've got cash on the balance sheet. I've got options. I can stay the course. I can even buy some of my weakened competitors. Or I can say, you know what, I'm going to take chips off the table, sell part of my business, and then continue to grow. That's optionality. And then some of the other things that I want you to think about, because this is another little signal. A lot of people will say to me, well, I had someone reach out that's interested in buying my company. They're very serious. Or I have this investor that wants to put capital in. And that is usually a good signal. But if it's only one, it's not a strong enough signal, because a lot of times that one will not close a deal. They're going to say they're interested, they're going to want to move forward, and then it just doesn't happen. What makes you have options is multiple credible buyers, people that have the money, that are interested in buying your company, want to pay you maximum value for it. Then all of a sudden that's optionality, because you have leverage. If there's one buyer, they have leverage. If there's four, you have leverage, right? So that's kind of the way I think about optionality in the real world. And I'll get on to like good news here in a minute. Just like a couple punches. But this is the reality, right? So for so many 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs, it is this kind of trap. And again, I've been thinking about it a lot as being asset rich and option poor, because the more and more I look at businesses, including many of my own in the past, they look so good on paper and I feel so good about the growth and the value, but then I think, what can I do with them right now? Does someone want to buy it, or can I raise a lot of money? And the answer was, not really. I maybe have 1 or 2 options, and you really need to have a lot. And then the other one, if you haven't heard the founder's paradox before, I didn't come up with this. I forget who initially coined the term, but it resonated with me so much. It's basically, the more valuable you are to your company, the less valuable your company is. So if you are truly the guy that closes the deal, the woman that writes the code, the key, that is great, because you're valuable. You might have job security in your own business, but your business has less value because it doesn't run with a team and SOPs and all the things. The business is you. So the good news is, shifting to that, optionality isn't luck. It's not something that you wake up one day and say, gosh, now I finally have, because I reached 10 million in revenue, or I'm finally at 2 million in EBITDA, now I have options. This is a system that you implement and you create and you proactively can do. And the reason I am passionate about this stuff is this has kind of been my life's journey. So like many of you, I've been an entrepreneur my working life, so 30 plus years now, I'm getting old. And most notably, taken 6 companies from idea to exit. And so being on that journey, I made a million mistakes, but I have learned a lot about this process, which we'll talk about. In addition to my own companies, I've been a pretty big angel investor, so I've been on the journey with lots of other people that are trying to navigate through this stuff. And I spent a handful of years on a public company board that was valuable at the time, but it's become more valuable as I look back on it, because we were multi-billion-dollar company buying businesses. So I got to see how businesses at that level, because I'd always run small startups and early stage companies, how a business operates at that level, but how they buy companies. What do they value? How do they sort of evaluate risk? How do they think about what something is really worth? And that experience has shaped a lot of the way I've built my companies and the way I recommend people do it. But most importantly, the bottom 2 points on here are really the main thing for me, which is I made a decision when my daughter was born that I was going to be a present dad, and I was going to be home for dinner almost every day at 5 o'clock. And by optimizing for time with my family, what I did, not knowing any better at the time, unintentionally, is I created massive optionality for myself, because I wasn't required anymore in the office, because everyone knew I was going to leave at 5 o'clock. And if something happened at 5:15 or 6 o'clock, the right people stepped up. And so my businesses actually got better. I pulled my daughters out of school and traveled the world while I was running companies. And I don't say any of that to brag at all. I'm basically saying I know from my own experience that creating options is where the real power is. So the ability to step away from your business and leave, the ability to raise capital, sell your business is the optionality that you want. So it's something I'm very passionate about. So I will say, as I tell people all the time, I am definitely not telling you to sell your company. I joke around a lot about people should sell their companies, and there's value in that, but the real key is you have to have the option. You have to have the ability to sell it now. You have to have people wanting to buy it, wanting to pay maximum value for it, because if you do that, every other option is available to you. The hardest thing for you to do, for an entrepreneur to do, is to sell 100% of their business for maximum value. Everything else is a subset of that. You want to sell minority business, you want to raise capital, all of those are a subset of being able to sell a business 100% at maximum value. So if you do that and you're ready for that, you have all these other options. Or as I've been saying, a sellable business is just a stronger business. There's nothing more powerful as an entrepreneur than having people want to buy your business and you just don't have to sell. You're not even motivated to sell. It's like, yeah, it's a great business. Matter of fact, I don't even go to the office anymore. It's just freaking great. That's a great business.
Hey, what kind of employee count have your businesses had? You say you left at 445, like how many employees?
I've had a pretty big range. I mean, most of my companies were, 10 to 30. I had a few that were 150. So it sort of ranged a lot. And then when I sold, I had to work for big, unfortunate companies for a brief period, but my companies were usually smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some real quick examples, and what I'd like you to imagine is I'm going to talk about a few companies that had incredible exits, and I've given plenty of examples in the past. I've got some new ones that I want to share with you, and what I want you to be thinking about is it fair? And I think hopefully you'd agree. If not, this presentation doesn't work near as well. Companies that sold for maximum value, that crushed an exit, could do anything they wanted, right? They could raise money if they wanted, they could buy a competitor, they could do nothing. And so I love these examples because these are companies that are defying the odds so dramatically. And you can literally do a Google search and AI search and find a new one pretty much every week. But OpenAI just bought IO products for $6.5 billion, no revenue at the time of the acquisition. You can't have a revenue or an EBITDA multiple if you have no revenue, right?
Johnny Ives, right?
I think that was Johnny Ives, yeah. GlaxoSmithKline, again, no revenue, pays $2 billion for a health business. Google acquires Wiz, one of the big deals in the last year or two, cloud security, 50 times revenue, not EBITDA, 50 times revenue. And then the one that's been happening in the last couple weeks that they're saying isn't an acquisition but had over $1 billion of value when OpenClaw got acquired for what they're saying is $1 billion, only a few months old. These are businesses that are defying the odds in such a dramatic way. It's not an EBITDA multiple, it's not a revenue multiple, it is off the charts crazy outcomes. And so the question becomes, how have they done that? What is their secret? What is it they're doing differently when I can tell you the average business in the world sells for 4.7 times EBITDA? That's the average. No matter where you are in the world, what industry you're in, 4.7 times EBITDA is what deals close at. And these are 50 times revenue or no revenue and getting billions of dollars. So they're defying the odds in a dramatic way. Well, the answer is these companies were all acquired because of their strategic value to the buyer. They are not financial deals. There has absolutely nothing to do with a multiple of anything. Revenue, EBITDA. When you see 50 times revenue, it's because after the deal, someone came in and said, what was the revenue at the time of the acquisition? Wiz was at X, so that's 50 times revenue. They were acquired purely because they unlocked something for the buyer that was worth billions of dollars to them. So businesses are really, truly based on their strategic value. So I want to talk about with our time here this morning, I'll rip through these quickly, 4 critical moves that I would suggest that you make that really dramatically change and create optionality for you and your business. So here are the 4, and we'll talk about each one of these in a little bit of detail. The first is you have to focus on strategic value. So although financials are important, if you have a great revenue business and you're profitable, that is a good thing. I'm never dismissive of that. But the true value and true optionality is when you have created strategic value that people care about, that people want. That is where real value lies. Number 2, we'll talk about learning to use their math. Because price, when people think about raising money or selling a business, they always think about negotiating skill. Oh, Mac, you must have figured out some clever way to negotiate. The reality is, price is really an ROI discussion. It is not a negotiation. So it's always about using their math. We'll talk about that. Number 3, engineering readiness. One of the biggest things I will tell you is if you are ready so that you could sell your business tomorrow, you are going to have a much better path from this day forward. You just have to be proactive to engineer that. And then the last thing I'll talk about, it's kind of been my biggest epiphany of the last year, bless you, and that is accountability. It's one of the things that I think a lot of us as entrepreneurs and as humans are lacking. So we'll talk about that. Everything else is pretty much tactics. So we're going to dive into these. So focus on strategic value. Again, it makes perfect sense. Everyone in this room has been sort of inundated. If you go to banks, if you go to merchant banks, investment bankers, you talk to anyone about your business, the first question is, tell me about your last 12 months. Give me your LTM. What was your revenue? What was your EBITDA, right? That is where everyone focuses their energy. And we are sort of designed to think about quarter-over-quarter growth and profitability and margin. Those are very natural things. So we think, well, our business's value is based on those numbers. That is how we are looked at. That's how we're valued. So I love this chart. Some of you may have seen it before, but this is the S&P 500. Arguably the 500 largest, most valuable companies on earth, the Googles and Facebooks and Teslas and Nvidias, all the best companies in the world. And it shows from the 70s to the 2020s, what percentage of the value of these companies, the biggest in the world, are made of tangible versus intangible assets.
Oh my God.
Now he's lying. He's got to be lying. Someone back there with a clicker. Click, click. So you can see back in the 70s, the bulk of the value of these companies was made up of tangible assets, things you can touch and feel, inventory, equipment, tough stuff, right? But the shift is really dramatic. When you get up into the 2020s, and it's gotten more and more extreme every year, 90% of the value of the largest companies on earth is made up of intangible assets, things that you cannot touch and feel. Brand names, trademarks, copyrights, domain names, those are what people literally early in my career used to call soft and fluffy metrics. But the largest, most successful companies on earth, 90% of their value, which their value, by the way, is pegged by hedge funds and really sophisticated traders that are deciding what they're worth, 90% of their worth is based on intangible assets. They're not trading on cash, they're not trading on cash flow, they're trading on what is the Apple patent worth, what is the brand worth. That is 90% of the value. And if it's true for the biggest companies on earth, it is also true for you. It is not just for these 500 companies. This is how companies are truly valued. So if you don't hear anything else I say, which hopefully that's not true, but as you're building your business, as you think about raising capital, if you were ever to sell your company, if you sell them based purely on financial metrics, you are leaving money on the table. And I would argue life-changing money. Do not sell your business based on a EBITDA multiple alone. That is leaving a lot of money on the table. Your business is valued on strategic things. Critical move number 2, you have to learn to use their math. I think this is super interesting, and this is really all about looking at your own business through the lens of a prospective buyer. What would they see? What would they value? And again, you can imagine, despite what I just said, and some of you have already sold businesses, I know that, when you started talking to prospective buyers, they did in fact still ask you, tell me about your last 12 months, right? They go right to financial things. But this is the question that everyone is trying to answer. They're asking you questions about finance and they're looking at spreadsheets, but they're really trying to understand, if I owned your business, what would it unlock for me? What would be possible if I had your team, your trademarks, your assets? That's what I'm really trying to figure out. I'm using all these questions, I'm using a team of analysts to look at your numbers, but I'm really trying to figure this out. So as a seller, as an entrepreneur, this is where the power is. You don't want them to try to discover this. You want to show them exactly what this is. You want to answer this question for them. And so this is where using their math multiplies outcomes and prices kind of off the charts. Because if you focus on your numbers and where you are, you're going to get a very traditional outcome, a multiple of EBITDA, a multiple of revenue. If you focus on their math, it kind of blows off the sheet. So I'll give you a quick case study. I've talked about a few different ones over the years. This is one of my companies, a company called Kick. So back in the 2010s, I'm a big soccer guy. It's been a lifetime passion of mine. My daughter was playing. I flew from San Francisco to South Carolina to go to a soccer tournament. And I remember getting on the plane with a little TSA, everything was on my phone, check into my flight, go through TSA. And I get to this tournament and I literally felt like I stepped into a time warp. It was like laminated player cards and 3-ring binders, and let me check. And I'm like, I'm a technology guy, I gotta fix this. And so we created this company called Kick to really innovate the youth soccer world. And it sounds like a micro niche of a business, but it is a multi-billion-dollar business in the United States. If you have kids that play soccer, or nieces or nephews or friends, a lot of kids by the time they're 12 or 13 are paying $3,000, $4,000 a year. There are 9,000 soccer clubs in the US, 25 million registered players. It's a big business. And so we went to kind of innovate in this space and modernize and digitize it. And I believe that Kick created the best products in the industry. But all of a sudden, this little niche that we were pursuing wasn't a niche anymore. Other people started recognizing it. One of our competitors raised $50 million in venture. We had several really big media companies that were dipping down in our space, and we were like, we're this little small tech company that's getting ready to get our ass kicked. So what do? We either raise capital or we sell the company. And as we got into dialogue with potential buyers and looked at all the options, NBC Sports was one of the companies that was really expressing a lot of interest in us. And they offered us a few $1 million early on for our technology. And our technology, I still think, was the best in the industry, but I went to them almost immediately and said, because I knew they were trying to break into youth soccer. And in the United States, again, there are 9,000 soccer clubs. And what NBC was going to have to do on their own is cold call and use their sales force and try to reach those 9,000 clubs. And at the time, I knew that NBC had a product. Their cheapest product was a $2,500 offering, and then they had really big offerings. So I went to them and I basically said, don't pay attention to our technology. Like, that's secondary. We have 6,000 of the 9,000 clubs in this country already using our platform. They're already my customers. 3/4 of the market is sitting on my platform. And rather than you having to go out and sell them, the day you buy my company, they're your customers. And if they buy your cheapest product, I'm handing you $15 million tomorrow. And so, as you can imagine, the conversation shifts pretty dramatically. Now, I always say, it doesn't mean that anybody's gonna give you $15 million because you show them a spreadsheet, but you're no longer talking about $1 million or $2 million or whatever someone has offered you because they think your tech is worth that or they think your EBITDA is worth that. You're showing them, here's what I give you, here's what I represent for you. I give you $15 million, and that's conservative because $2,500 is your cheapest product. If they all buy or half them buy a higher priced product, it's probably 25 or 30 million. So it really shifts the conversations. You always have to be thinking about, what do I represent to these buyers? What do I unlock for them? That's where the real juice is.
This was NBC?
NBC, yeah.
And what was the product they were selling for $2,500?
Basically, they had a whole like registration suite and tournament suite and like letting players sign up for soccer, baseball, those things.
Youth soccer.
Yeah, youth soccer, yeah, adult. Yeah, and they were big in most other sports. They were really big in hockey and basketball, but they didn't dominate soccer, and that was one of the reasons we were able to say, we can give you that market.
Did you do the deal?
Yeah, we sold to NBC, yeah.
For $15 million?
Not for $15 million, but. And it's funny, I was thinking when I put that up, I was like, someone's gonna ask me what we sold it for. I can tell you just about almost every one of my companies, what we sold for, what the deal was. That's the one I'm really not supposed to talk about, simply because I was on a podcast being interviewed about exits, and I talked about how clever my negotiation with NBC Sports was and how I structured this and that, and I got a very aggressive call from their attorneys. Said, you will never disclose that again. Fair enough.
Don't make my client look stupid.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, yeah. And they took the podcast down too, yeah. All right, we'll keep going here real quick. So, critical move number 3, add accountability. This really was a big epiphany for me over the last 6 to 7 months. And I think, again, most of you can relate. I have said this so many times to myself and my spouse and my friends, is like, one of the greatest things about being an entrepreneur is I just have to answer to myself. I get to decide where I spend time, who I spend time with, what I put into the business, what my strategy is. If I want to, be here, I can do that. And that's one of the greatest things about entrepreneurship. Guess what one of the worst things about entrepreneurship is? I don't have to answer to anybody but myself. And so I've been thinking about this analogy, and it's really relevant for me. This was an AI generated picture that I think I said a 50-year-old, or I'm actually older than 50, almost 55, middle-aged white male that probably needs to be more fit. And the idea is, like, if I wanted to become fit, I could find the #1 trainer in the world. I could find her and say, I'm going to buy her course, I'm going to learn about nutrition and what I need to do in the gym, the supplements I should be taking, and I could start doing that tomorrow. Or I could go meet her in the gym. And the difference is night and day. And I know everyone knows this, right? If you hire a trainer, you show up, you go to the gym. And not only do you show up, when I'm doing it by myself and I'm doing 10 curls, those last 2 are kind of, but the trainer's like, no, arm all the way out, arm all the way up. Not that I have a trainer, but if I did. Wendy's over there looking at me like, look at him, he doesn't work out. I know what you're thinking. The difference between those 2 pictures is accountability. That is literally the difference. The same trainer, you can get all their information, you're motivated, but if you're taking that content in online, you're listening to the course or whatever, it's very different than when you show up in the gym. And I've been thinking about this so much because as entrepreneurs, we know that we don't have to answer to anyone, and therefore we stay in autopilot and average because no one really holds us accountable, and we don't have to be held accountable. And so, and I was thinking I might get through a whole presentation without saying AI, but I put a big AI in the middle of this one because it really has struck me even more that I know for myself, I'll speak for myself, the place that I am most worried is when I slip into autopilot. And it is very easy. No matter what success you have in life, when things are working, it just becomes really easy to take your foot off the gas just a little bit and be like, oh, it works, I know what I'm doing, I don't really need to like double down, I don't need to focus like that anymore, I can just kind of slow down. And autopilot is a really dangerous place to be, and I've thought that and felt that for a long time, and AI is making me feel 1,000 times more committed to, I do not want to be on autopilot. I cannot keep my, I can't take my eye off the ball, foot off the pedal, whatever the analogy you want to use is.
You're saying because AI could displace you.
Me, no way, but yeah, just kidding. No, I mean, I tell you, the thing I've been thinking a lot about AI, and we can talk about this in more detail at the end if you want, but AI is going to, of course, displace jobs and change roles and things like this. What I think people are underestimating is what's going to happen with AI in the larger macroeconomic environment. Hedge funds are starting to reduce their positions already because hedge funds are usually years ahead of most of us, and they're seeing a lot of unknown risk. They don't know exactly what's going to happen. Businesses that were very predictable are no longer predictable. Cash flow streams that were predictable forever are no longer predictable. And when hedge funds start pulling back, that means they're nervous that the risk doesn't match up with the opportunity.
In general businesses or AI businesses?
General businesses, where in the equity markets. And I think what's going to happen in the next 18 to 24 months is all of the big private equity firms and big strategic buyers are going to realize they also don't know what's about to happen, and when people don't know, they just stop, they just wait. I'm not going to buy anything, I'm not going to invest, I'm just going to wait. And that is a huge factor in where most companies are acquired, where most capital comes from. Those capital allocators, I think, are going to wait and see how things settle before they move forward. So again, accountability, this is very true in Baby Bathwater more than most groups that I would ever be talking to, is you just don't need motivation, right? You're very motivated. Nobody needs more information. We're all one click away from anything we'd ever want to learn, any expert. The problem is a lot of us just don't have accountability, and accountability is what takes most people, whether it's in the gym, in business, in your personal life, what it is, from average to elite. And I really got to witness it on this public company board because the CEO and the founder of that company was incredibly wealthy, did not have to answer to anyone. And as you get more successful in life, it's funny, everyone around you, it just becomes more yes and wants to smile and say nice things to you. And it's really hard to find people that truly hold you accountable. And I would watch him, as a very successful CEO worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, have to show up to a boardroom of us and listen to what we said and prepare the budget, and we decided. And so that accountability improved the business, and I was like, I need that and want that for my life. That's what entrepreneurs are missing, and so that's been a big thing for me. So we can talk about this again a little bit at the end if you want, but adding accountability, I just can't stress enough that whether you do it through creating advisory boards or you have mentors, you have coaches, anybody around you, but the key is you want people that are truly committed to making you better, not just saying the nice things. We can all get that. Even AI can tell us now how smart we are. Oh, that's a great idea, Mac. You really need people to say that is a stupid idea and you're not working hard enough anymore, right? You need someone to truly hold you accountable. All right. Last of the critical moves, engineer readiness. This is really important. So some of you have heard me talk about the 8 a.m. test. This is what I always think about in terms of exit readiness. And so bear with me, I know I've been talking for a while here, but imagine you're sitting in your office and it's Thursday afternoon, it's late afternoon, it's almost 5 o'clock. You're thinking Friday is going to be a super easy day. It's going to look like this outside. It's going to be beautiful. You've got an easy day with family and friends over the weekend. So you're kind of shifting into cruise control, downshifting for the weekend. And the phone rings. And on the other end of the phone, you pick it up. Hey, this is Mac speaking. Is John Smith. And John, you don't know him personally, but he's the CEO of your largest competitor. He's kind of an industry icon. Everybody knows who this guy is. And so John says, Mac, I'm going to cut right to the chase. I want to buy your company. And before you say a word, I want you to know that we are ready to pay you in cash, pay you above industry multiples. We can close in 30 days. Are you interested? Most people fall out of their chair if they get a call like that. So you play it cool, you don't fall out of your chair. And most people would say something along the lines of, wow, John, that's amazing. I'm flattered. Thank you so much. But you're catching me off guard. I'd love to learn more. Can we talk maybe week after next? And that's when John says, well, that's the catch. My CFO and I are in town and we have to start due diligence tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock or this is a no-go. So the opportunity, the biggest opportunity of your life, close for a cash deal in 30 days, is based on when they show up tomorrow morning at your office at 8 o'clock. Most entrepreneurs do one of two things. The first is you say, John, that sounds great, and you hang up the phone, you pick the phone back up and you call your co-founder and leadership team and CPA and CFO and significant other and say, get to the office, we're pulling an all-nighter. And you do everything in your power to go through the file cabinets and find the missing folders, and you go through your Dropbox and go, yeah, we haven't updated our financials since last quarter, and you scramble and do everything you can so that you'll at least be, as best prepared as possible for 8. Or even more tragically, what a lot of people will do is say, John, I hate this, but I have back-to-back meetings all day tomorrow. There's just no way I could fit you in. I hope this is something we can pick up in the future, and you walk away from what could be the biggest opportunity of your life because you know in your heart and you know in your head, there's no way you're ready. There is no way, because you know exactly what John's doing. This is not a secret, right? Companies do this all the time because that is their expectation. They want to see where the bodies are buried. They want to see the skeletons. They know your financials are not updated. So they want to come in and catch you off guard because that's how they determine the opportunity and the risk. This is what companies do. When I was on the board of that company, when we were buying companies, I used to show up to meetings a few hours early and I would try to walk around the office before I'd go to the meeting and just ask questions. You just want to understand a business before you buy it. And so in this scenario, think about if this happened to you, how ready would you be, whether it's an investor or selling your company? And some of you may say, well, I don't even know if I want to sell it. There is some amount of money that I will strangle you if you don't sell it for. No, there's life-changing opportunities that you should sell it, and you want to be ready. And so here's what I often say in our when I'm working with people in our Exit DNA program is we build deal rooms. So even if you're 2 or 3 years away from exit, we use a due diligence request list from one of the top M&A law firms in the country, and we design a deal room, and you organize your documents, and you get everything ready so that anytime and every time, the answer is right click and share. So someone calls and says, I'm interested in buying your company, and you smile because you know exactly what they're trying to do, and the standard is they know you're not ready. And so what most people do, even if you're thinking about selling your company, is say, let me get that together, send me the list, I'll get it to you, and they'll think in the next week or 2 you'll respond. If you right click and share a deal room, they will be blown away. And the leverage that you're gonna get in every single moment from that point forward, you have so much credit. They're like, oh my God, how organized are they? How professional are they? So when the first little thing comes up in due diligence as a risk, they're giving you so much credit, but they're really organized. They were ready, right? So this is what you want. You don't ever want to be caught off guard.
Do you use a particular software for that? Or?
I don't. I mean, there are a lot of things you can do. I'm a big believer in whatever is easiest. So Dropbox, Box, whatever you use. The key is having it structured and up to date. And once you do it, is usually like an hour or 2 on a Sunday, you use this format. All you do is just keep it updated for it, and then it's like 15 minutes a week. Drag the new employee folder into the right thing. It's never a problem again. So all right, I'm wrapping up here. So what's the big secret? Having a business that you can sell tomorrow means you have options today. That is the biggest thing to me, is again, it's not about selling your company, it is having the option, being ready, being prepared so people want to buy it and pay you maximum value. All right, so I put this little QR code up simply because I've got an ebook and a bunch of stuff that I'll absolutely happily share with you for free if you just throw your name on my aggressive marketing list. My team will hunt you down. All right, what questions can I answer? 15 minutes of Q&A. Burning questions, all at once. Yes?
When you think about strategic value, are you trying to cast the widest net possible and create valuable assets that the widest diversity of buyers would be interested in? Or are you trying to get really, really focused on a particular buyer type and then just like relentlessly pursue that and create the most amount of value for that person?
Yeah, what a great question. So I would say 2 things. One, it's kind of like never let the tail wag the dog. You know, people say that about tax stuff, and I would say it about this. Like, you should build your business the way you think is the most valuable, the smartest, the most strategic, not specifically because you know this one group would be interested if you double down on something, but you want to be conscious of it. If you're constantly thinking, we have this tool that I call the solid gold buyer sheet, and the whole point of it is try to find 3 to 5 different industries of buyers that would be interested in what you've created. And that exercise, which again can take 30 minutes, the more creative and diverse you get of thinking who would want what I've built, the more you just have it top of mind that, oh, you know what, as we build this product out, that would be really valuable to this group. And so just the being aware of and thinking about this stuff proactively changes outcomes. Now, as you get closer, if you like, I want to sell my business, then those become more actionable. In my mind, it's like, okay, well, who do I think is most likely to buy it? What are they most interested in? Those are the things I really want to highlight. When I talk about that company Kick, I used to do this case study because ultimately it came down to NBC Sports and this other company, completely different industries. And the way I described Kick was very different. You would think I was talking about 2 different companies because to one buyer, they didn't care about how many players we had. They needed technology that I had. And so that is part of what I call an irresistible exit story. When you find buyers, you want to speak to what you unlock for them. What value do you create for them? And so the more you can do that, it's like a muscle you build. The more you get articulate about, I have this value, there's someone in the world that wants it. And I think about it in terms of stacking value too. Like NBC was mostly interested in that, but they also wanted our technology. We did have a good brand, and those are all just stacking value. Even to the point when I used to negotiate, I would draw a line down the middle of the paper, and I did this with NBC, don't tell their attorneys. And they said, we want this, this, this. We're an asset purchase. We want to buy this, we want to buy this. And so I said, okay, great, and I listed those out. And then everything I could possibly think of, I put on the other side of this sheet of paper. I was like, so you don't want this domain, you don't care about this technology, you don't care about any of these customers? And they're like, yeah, we want all that too. I was like, all right, now let's talk about the price for those, because you just told me about these, right? So that's stacking value, so. Good question, yeah.
So when it comes to getting yourself out of the business, how do you, if you play multiple roles in the business, how do you determine like the sequencing? Like, should I start at the top? I'm going to hire a CEO to replace me, let them replace the team, or should I start lower down?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I think that it's super common for founders to be in the critical path, and you want to look at those things. And I would almost say, what can you extract yourself out of almost immediately, because you don't really have to be in it already. You're just doing it because you can, or you want to, or they would like you there. The really interesting thing about me, about the story is when I started leaving the office at 4:45, I literally, this was a true story. The first time it ever happened, my daughter had just come home from the hospital. She was too young to even know I was coming home. But I was standing in front of our conference room, running a session at the whiteboard, and my little alarm went off at 4:45. And I dropped the dry erase pen and turned around and walked out of the office. And I literally think everybody in the conference room was going to be like, haha, Mac's coming right back in, that was funny. And I drove home, and I just left. And the next couple of days, I did the same thing. 4:45, I stood up and walked out of the office. And what happened was pretty miraculous, and that was, you could see the whole company start to shift, and it was, okay, Mac is going to leave at 4:45. Who's going to run the meeting when Mac leaves? When the customer calls, who's going to take the call? And what I saw was my team, which was all very capable, I was holding them down. I was actually, because if Mac's in the meeting, Mac's going to run it. If a customer calls, Mac's going to take the call. So just by literally a forcing function of I'm leaving, the systems and processes and team got better. And so some of it is, I almost tell people, you just have to commit to like, I'm going to leave, And now sometimes you may leave and ship breaks, and then you're like, okay, what's the system we need to put in place? Do we need to hire someone? So the forcing function to me is the fastest and best way to say, I'm going to extract myself from the day-to-day, I'm going to automate things, delegate things, and then there might be a few things I have to hire for. But the more if you just do it on paper, it's kind of a tactical exercise until you walk out the door. And that's when you really see.
How do you keep from people taking that as leading by example, and your team wants to leave at 4:45 as well, and nobody's there?
Yeah, you just fire them. No, it's a great question. And so my experience was 2 things. One is when I got out of people's way, they actually were able to thrive. They were happier, they were doing more, they were taking on more responsibility. That actually allowed me to give them a more clear career path. For a lot of individuals, they were more interested in the growth and the opportunity than the flexibility. Like a lot of them, when my companies were tech companies and they weren't worried about being home with their kid at 4:45, they wanted more responsibility, more money, more future, right? And so I really got to see what motivated people. And then from that point on, that was part of my ongoing process. I would interview people constantly, new employees, current employees. What's important to you? What role do you want here? And one of my favorite stories, I have a young, he was an engineer that wanted to join our company, change industries, and he came as an unpaid intern. So he would show up after he left his engineering job to be an unpaid intern. And I sat down with him in like week 3 because he was super smart and super driven. I just said, if you want to work here full time, tell me what you're interested in. And he started giving me all this stuff. I said, no, I mean, literally, like, do you want to run the engineering department one day? Do you want my job? And he said, honestly, I want to start my own company one day. I just want to learn. And I said, great. And I almost immediately, we hired him full time, and I told him, I need you to be a great engineer, but if you want to start your own company, you need to learn sales and marketing, and I'm going to pull you into those meetings. I just want you to crush it for me in your job, and I'm going to help you. He's the CEO of a venture-backed business today because he worked so hard because we were enabling him to do what he wanted. And so I found personally that my motivation to optimize for family, I had a few people that cared about freedom. And so I would say to them, great, let's design your job so you get your work done in 4 hours or on the weekends, whatever you want. And I still work that way. I mean, any company I'm involved in, no one has hours, no one has set schedules. It's all performance. I don't care when people work, where they work, how they work. I just really, truly care about performance. And most people thrive in an environment like that. If they don't, they're not going to fit in the company. Yes, sir.
Does the multiplier change for an e-commerce brand that has like international IP, like it has a large IP portfolio? What is that multiplier and how much does it change?
Yeah, I mean, the key for me is always, if you look at a business as it stands, you have an e-commerce business and you have all the metrics that make it successful, and then you say, okay, well, then on top of that, I have this portfolio of intellectual property, and it's not only domestic, it's global or whatever. That is all valuable, and to a set of private equity investors and people, they would say, I love that business, here's what it's worth. The real key to me is who has to have that portfolio, whose business would be fundamentally different if they own the portfolio. And finding that person is where multiple no longer matters, because it's the real beneficiary of that. And it to me, that's where so many people, including some great investment bankers, fall short, is they just look at your business and they say, let's go talk to private equity and let's go talk to some people in your industry, and they're missing somebody in the world, I don't know who it is, that if they owned your intellectual property, they would 10x where they are. That's who you got to find. That's the outlier.
Can I add another question?
Yeah, sure.
Does the whole game change completely if you're not on retail? So if you're crushing it on, let's say, Amazon and direct, you have your email list and you have everything right, but you're not in the retail side. Yeah. Does that make a big difference to the buyer?
No. So in businesses that are kind of multi-channel, one of the things I always think is, you need to prove where you're successful, right? So you start in a channel, then you kind of add channels, and hopefully they're all working. You don't want to continue to diversify to the point that like now you're spread so thin you're not good at any of them, right? Because you're trying to keep doing new things. Buyers, often, that is their opportunity. It's like, hey, I could take you into retail. I have 6,000 retail stores. I could take you right into retail. Or, oh, you're not big on XYZ platform? Like, yeah, that's what I'm really good at. And so you want to give buyers something that gives them the growth opportunity. What I would often do, like I had an apparel brand, which was kind of a deviation from my tech stuff, and we would test certain things, and I always wanted to be able to say to a buyer, we tested and it works, we just don't have the resources to do what you could do with it. So you kind of dangle in front of them like, we know it's going to be successful, but imagine what you could do with it. So as a seller, I used to always say, I'm a very self-deprecating seller. I'm like, oh, I've got this small team, we could barely get this thing, but imagine what you could do with it, because buyers' egos are great. Yeah, Mac's right, we could crush it with this thing, so you want to be able to have some of that story to tell a buyer that you've done really well in all these channels, but you still haven't been able to get to retail, and they could take you there.
I love that.
Good question.
A software company I bought, you did the same thing to me.
Oh yeah?
I said, with your marketing engine, with this thing, you could make it huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, from a
kind of
perspective, as an entrepreneur, at what point do you find, based on your experience with your businesses, makes the best sense for you to sell? depending on time of like sets like business. I know it's different for every business.
Yeah.
I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I do this exercise I call the 5 factors, and it's looking at a bunch of different things, right? Macroeconomic environment, the industry that you're in, your business performance, your personal situation, and then your what I call human factors, like other employees or stakeholders or whatever. And so there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into that mix, but the reality is, I mean, a lot of it comes down for a founder in a tightly held business to what you want and what you perceive. My companies, if anything, so I had 6 exits, I would say 5 of them legitimately, if anything, were a little bit early. Like I probably sold a little bit early, meaning there was a little bit more opportunity if I would have stayed in it, but I was always happy to be early because I was afraid of being 1 minute too late. And I would look at the industry and be like, I can see consolidation, I can see changes, and if I miss this window, I'm afraid of what that would mean. And not to be a doomist or whatever, doomer, that's kind of how I feel right now about a lot of businesses is, you know what, again, because of AI and other factors, it's like, if I wanted to sell a company, if I had a company right now today that I felt pretty good about and I was thinking, maybe 3 or 4 years from now I'd sell it, I would be thinking, what if I sold it in the next year or 2 before we really see the market kind of freeze up for a bit? I could be totally wrong, but I constantly was thinking about that stuff with my own companies. What if this happens? What if we go into a recession? A lot of people in the US, a lot of people that have product companies in the last 5, 10 years don't know what a recession is. Like we've only been in a raging bull market for a long time. You know, if you have a product that is a discretionary product, like it's kind of different in a recession, you know? And so I would try to be thinking about all of these factors and going, okay, well, in a perfect world, when would I want to take my chips off the table? And if the answer is long term, I've been telling people I'm working with right now, I've had a number of people that have great businesses that want to keep running it for 5 to 10 years. And I'm like, great, as long as you're doing it open eyes, my only suggestion to people is de-risk on the way up. If 100% of your net worth is in that business and you think it'll be worth a ton in 5 years or 10 years, maybe take a few $1 million off the table now, sell a little piece and keep doing that on the way up so it's not all on the what if. I watched 2 companies go from almost $100 million kind of enterprise value. One went to 7 figures and sold. They turned down $100 million in cash because they were trying to get to 125. Business fell apart, sold for just under 10 million. And another one that was about 70, 75 million that waited 2 more quarters to get their numbers up, and COVID hit and took them almost to 0. And so it happens a lot. It happens a lot. Yeah, and the arbitrary number thing, that's probably one, maybe last thing I would say to you all is, don't let any arbitrary numbers guide your thinking. A lot of entrepreneurs will say, I'm going to sell at 10 million. I'm going to sell at 25 million. I'm going to sell at 100 million, whatever, some round number that sounds big. And it's arbitrary, and it makes your thinking very, it really messes up your thinking, because you know what? Instead of 10 million in another year, sell it for 8.5 now and be incredibly happy you got out of that business and put money in your pocket. You just don't know what's going to happen. You know, you don't know what tomorrow holds. You don't know what's, so I'm a big believer in, don't try to top tick the market and give it 1 more quarter, because as entrepreneurs, we're optimists. We're always like, next year is going to be better. Next quarter is going to be better. Sometimes it's, you know what, just take the chips off the table.
Was you attracting buyers and then they were reach out to you?
I am a big believer. One of my common slides that I didn't have in this is, I am a big believer in businesses are sold. Like that means it is on you as an entrepreneur to make it happen. Find buyers. The CEO of NBC Sports, I cold called 2 years before we sold the company. And not to sell the business. I cold called him and said, I had a lot of respect for them. I was going to be in town. They were in Minneapolis, this division. I said, I'm going to be in town. I'd love to meet you. Just shake your hand. And he said, you know, when are you going to be in town? About Tuesday. I was like, great. And I booked a flight. I had no plans to be there until he scheduled the meeting. And I just got to know him, and I liked him, and I stayed in touch with him. And if I would not have proactively reached out to him, there's no way they would have been in the process. So I'm a big believer. Almost all my companies, my first one was the only one that people kind of came knocking on our door, but every other company I identified buyers, I proactively reached out to them, constantly in dialogue. So I'm a big fan of that. Yes, sir.
Does the math change if you're not selling the entire company, but just like the technology side or just a piece of it?
Yeah, so there's kind of 2 ways to think about selling less than 100% of a company. One is selling pieces and parts, like I'm going to sell the technology, I'm going to spin it out, or I'm going to sell that piece and I'm going to retain other pieces, sort of sell assets. And the other is sell equity. It's like I'm going to sell 25% of my company and retain 80. Both of those are possibilities. It's a lot easier to sell a percentage of equity than try to carve up assets, because normally that gets like, well, where's the engineer that runs this piece of technology? Oh, they got to come with the deal. You know, it gets a little messy. Selling a percentage of the company is often great. A lot of deals are sell some now, roll equity with the buyer, and then have another bite at the apple in the future. And those are great deals. My recommendation is always, though, when you're selling your company, guaranteed cash is the most important number. Doesn't have to be cash at close. One of my last companies I sold in 2018, I had a 5-year payout. I got a big cash at close and then monthly for 5 years, but it was contractually guaranteed. What you don't want is earn out performance. If this happens, then we pay you that. Those kind of deals, I value all that at zero and consider it a bonus if it happens. But guaranteed cash is the way you want to structure a deal, whether it's small percentage or big percentage. Is that my time? Thank you so much.